Good morning, Giles.
Morning.
Thank you very much for letting us come down to your great facility.
My pleasure.
Very sunny Somerset, no, nearly sunny Somerset, I should say.
It's trying.
It is trying for us, and hopefully the start of summer, maybe.
You should be so lucky.
Probably be raining tomorrow, as we know. Great to be here to do the sustainability podcast. We're going to be talking, obviously, about sustainability and what it means to Coca. But just a little bit, just before we go on to that, you've got a fairly large factory here with many machines. You want to just give us a little bit of an overview of that?
Sure thing. So we are purely a subcontract manufacturer, make parts for a range of different industries. We are pretty well into aerospace and automotive industry, but also hydraulic, nuclear, oil and gas, defense, medical. I mean, you name it. You know, anybody from 50 grand a year to 1.5 million a year, a real broad spread. And we favor that. That is something that we consciously pursue, because in general, when one market cools off a little bit, there's probably another one somewhere else that's
So it's better not have all your eggs in one basket, I guess. So
we've got a 40-year trading history. We're actually coming up on year 42 now. Family-owned business. My sister and I are third generation. Mum and dad are still there floating around in the background, but to be honest with you,
keeping an eye on you.
Less involvement I can get there on that front, the easier my life is. And this is our third building as well. So we started in a little village called West Coker near Yeovil. From there we moved to Chard, and then we moved here 5.5 years ago. New purpose-built facility, about 2,200 square meters total. We currently occupy about 2/3 of it, sublet another third, and we own a site on which we've got about another 3 acres of space for industrial development. So in terms of scope for growth and, you know, being in a healthy place for the business, this is exciting times for us.
Excellent. Well, that's really great to hear. Of course, the sustainability is a discussion that a lot of people are talking about in the industry, you know, globally. How we can, you know, reduce our carbon footprint. We're getting demands from supply chains, I guess, which you'll probably get as well from requirements. So for Coca, what does that mean? You've got a lot of machines, there's a lot of people, big building. So what does sustainability mean to Coca?
So is it interesting, having built a purpose-built facility in the relatively recent past, and it was a project that was obviously somewhat outside of our natural comfort zone and really gave us an opportunity to step back and think about some of these things in more detail than you tend to in day-to-day business operations. You know, we're all very in tune with this stuff in our day-to-day lives, and it's obviously been a key part of our business for, well, a decade, to be perfectly honest with you. You know, there are elements of our industry as a whole that I would argue are perhaps somewhat ahead of the curve. You know, we always recycle the vast majority of our waste because it has value attributed to it. You would be foolish not to. So from that point of view, there's certain areas, like I said, that perhaps we've been ahead of the curve, but then there's also other areas where we've been behind the curve. I think it's only in the relatively recent past, 5, 6, maybe 10 years, I might be doing some manufacturers a disservice, but it's only a relatively short period of time since the machine tool manufacturers have woken up to the fact that having green credentials on their machine, and specifically marketing their machine with power saving capabilities, electricity reduction capabilities, is something that's obviously got a lot more traction in recent years. Green tariffs on electricity production. So we have only quite recently resourced our electricity supply, and a key part of that decision-making process was the green credentials of the electricity supplier. There were options that were a marginally lower unit cost, but we were not as satisfied that the supply of electric had the same green credentials. So again, a key decision-making factor for us in that process. And then there's things that came, like I said, with the construction project. This building is better insulated than the previous building. We went over spec with that, not just because we are adjacent to houses and we're keen to get on with our neighbours and therefore didn't want to make a lot of racket, but also the environmental factor again was a key decision-making factor in their process. Our heating bill, our gas consumption bill is almost minimal. Specifically,
I was going to say, some of the good metrics that we like to use, and I guess that's probably one of the key things now with the, reducing our carbon footprint, is how we measure some of these areas.
Yeah.
And I guess that's one of the, I was going to ask you, if your energy usage.
So funnily enough, that has become a very hot topic in the last couple of years. Again, not least driven by the cost of energy, but also just turn the news on. Look at what's happening around the world. If we don't all start doing something, whether that's sorting your plastic waste from your glass waste in your recycling bin at home, to a multi-billion pound business choosing to use green energy sources and trying to be energy efficient, right the way up to, nation states and then doing their bit. We all have got to get on board.
Absolutely. We'll be responsible for it. And I think, that's how manufacturing will not only have to become more sustainable, but will also lead the way in becoming sustainable, as usual, with the innovation through UK business and manufacture design. Like you say, we're probably ahead of the game in a lot of these areas, and we're already doing a lot of the things and kind of things I kind of always say, little steps sometimes, get to the top floor quicker than sort of just looking at the whole thing as a massive project when we're doing lots of things. And obviously lots of things in the future regarding, solar, for instance. I know we discussed that earlier, and maybe on the cards for the future for you.
Oh, 100%. The only reason that we don't have solar installed and we didn't put it in from day one is we were behind schedule on the build project. Eventually we reached a point where it had to be scrapped off purely because of a time factor. We've got planning approval to put solar on the roof. We had the contractor lined up. The electrical hardware that's installed on the shop floor will accommodate the projected production that we'll get from the installation on the roof. It was purely a time factor. And then once we were in, various other priorities jumped up the pecking order from a CapEx point of view, and it kept getting shuffled around. It rarely ever dropped out of the top 5 wants and needs, but it wasn't always number 1 or number 2. It is now, again, muscling its way back to the top of that list. It's pretty high on the pecking order. And in fact, really in terms of resource consumption, at least 2 or 3 of the top 5 CapEx requirements that we are focused on this year are about energy reduction and improving our impact on the environment.
So a lot of good things you're doing. Obviously,
we try.
We're here also obviously with the point on the disposal of coolant and oil, which is great that you're using the oil and coolant savings. Have you seen sort of metrics on that sort of savings?
Yeah, much to the disappointment of our coolant and lube suppliers.
Yes, I know, not the best.
The obvious metric is that our consumption has dropped and dropped substantially at the same time as installing new plant. So if you were just looking at a straight line correlation, our fluid consumption right now in terms of the number of machines on site and the number of hours that the facility operates for, our consumption should be a record high. But actually, ever since we started installing the oil save, coolant save products, I think how long ago we actually started installing it now. I got a funny feeling the very first units went in charred in the old building. So a good probably 6 years ago. But I think maybe at the time we sort of bought a couple of them on a whim, oh, that's a nice looking product. Let's give that a try. And then, like you do, maybe didn't really sort of follow it up with the right monitoring processes to look at its effectiveness and things like that. That was renewed with vigor when we moved, given everything else that we were targeting from a consumption point of view during that time. And I think within 12 months of moving, we committed to a purchase order that saw us install coolant savers and oil savers on every single machine in the factory.
You got a few machines here as well, haven't you?
We're running 30, 31, 32 machines total now, something like that. So the savings have been drastic, which is great for us because not only is it a straight cost reduction, which, as a business, we're all driven by commercial factors, but also being able to point to reduced usage in one of our most problematic would be too strong a word, but you talk about pollutants and products that have an impact on the global environment.
Absolutely.
Anything that's oil related is going to be right at the top of that pecking order. So, there's another feather in our cap, another real point of pride for us that our reliance on that product and consumption of that product is reducing, not increasing.
No, exactly. And I think, like you say, the big aspect of sustainability side is the reduction in disposal. So, less oils and contaminants going away, having to be processed. That's going to be a key indicator in reducing carbon, zeros for factory. One of many things, I'm sure, like materials as well. There's many exotic materials. I know you machine here from, right up to sort of for some real toughies. But management of them, I guess, is important.
It absolutely is. And even cleanliness of metal waste is a key consideration. From a waste metal handler's point of view, they attribute greater value to that waste metal. The cleaner, purer, less contaminated it is. So again, the WorkGuard product has helped us improve in that area. I mean, really, you don't want to sit here and oversell it, and I appreciate your time, and to a certain extent, it's what we're here for. But no, it's difficult to find a negative to that product.
Obviously, the sustainability part, that's sort of, we like when we do these podcasts, we like to talk about the whole round, business. And one of the areas with sustainable, I call it, a 3-pronged thing. We've got the environment. There's a lot of important stuff we're doing already. And further improving. There's also the society and people aspects of it. and the economy. We've got to have a balance of the three. Otherwise, what we're going to be doing in the future if we don't have all three of them going. So we're still going to make things properly. We've got to make things innovatively fast, reduce waste on the machines. So, I see you've got a lot of technology out there, a lot of machines, so multiple access, and also the skill factor with people as well. How do you find that going forward?
It's a
challenge.
It's a challenge. I feel like that that word gets dropped into the conversation a lot when you start talking about skills and resource, but it's a fact. It is a challenge.
Yeah.
One of the things that that we've perhaps done slightly differently, we have quite a significant number of people on our staff currently who would have joined us with zero previous engineering background, engineering experience, including guys that are now running complete sections on the shop floor. The only seniority above them immediately is the management team.
Yep.
And they came and joined us 15, 16, 18 years ago with absolutely no engineering experience whatsoever.
Yep.
And that's something we pride ourselves on. That to us feels like another example of giving something back, imparting that skill set to the next generation. Yes, they could learn that through an apprenticeship or, a degree or whatever other mechanism might be available for them to study that. But obviously the benefit for us is we've also been able to teach them the way that generates the greatest value for us as a business, and then give them the opportunities to put those skills into practice and progress. And then we recognize and reward that progression, and it becomes somewhat self-fulfilling.
Yeah.
Machine wise, that's always an interesting one. It would be great to perhaps have a few more options that had a few less miles on them in terms of the global supply chain that supports that industry and that business. But again, it's the market we operate in. Commercial sensitivities are such that if you've got to build a machine to produce any of those parts that are sat on the table there in front of us, the machine has got to be sold at a price point that is economically viable, just the same as I've got to be able to sell the parts at a price point that is economically viable. And at the moment, the most economic route to market for a lot of components, consumables, oils, etc., will tend to be supply chains that still have perhaps a bit more mileage in them than we'd really like. And it's something that we discuss with our suppliers, whether it's a machine tool supplier, a fluid supplier, or a cutting tool supplier. And it is something that's conscious in our decision-making process. However, at the same time, if this is the best product for the job by some margin,
in fact, you've got to,
the facts stack up in such a way that you can't ignore that.
I think, hopefully we'll see more reshoring of suppliers. There's, feasibility, obviously, that some are never going to be able to do that, but we've got, a lot more, hopefully, manufacturing coming back in as well that we've lost before over the years. And sustainability is going to be one of the areas that's going to be a really big reason for doing that.
No, without a doubt. We are seeing across multiple industries a real push top down, as is often the way with big business and big industries. But it actually seems like the story that they've been pushing for some time, that, your environmental consciousness, your environmental impact as a business, the air miles, sea miles, road miles in our supply chain are now a decision-making factor. We've kind of heard this stuff from a lot of industries for maybe 10 years, and you've been able to sit back and think, well, you tell a good story, but is it really happening? Whereas in the last couple of years, there is genuine evidence that, okay, there's maybe some other factors in the last couple of years that have just given that the extra healthy little push. But it is clearly now a factor for these businesses.
Well, hopefully that's going to be, a positive for sustainability and manufacture. Because, I think the one thing we do have is a fantastic engineering, innovation about us. Hopefully, which will grow, and obviously getting people involved with that, people excited about engineering. Which, I think is going to be key. And I think that's where, the technology will help to get more younger people involved in engineering and coming into the industry saying, that's something I want to do. Where rather, I remember it in the 80s and 90s, it was something you were put into as a side thing. It was
always, if that fails, don't worry, you just fall back on the old manufacturing job.
Absolutely, which is, totally wrong in my, both feelings. And And I think now with the technology, you know, it is quite exciting. You look at the CAD CAM, the machines out there doing the different things all in one stop, and the
3D printing and the way
yes,
that's
exactly,
taken off as a
adaptive
hobby at home.
Yeah, that's now becoming. Have you got involved with that?
We
side of
have.
things? Yeah.
I've got a little 3D printer. I was badgered by guys on the shop floor who have 3D printers at home, telling me for years, we need to get one in the factory. It's going to be so good. I can do this, I can do that. And I'm thinking, we can print, you know, I can't print anything that I can sell. I look at a machine, where's the commercial return? What can I sell to a customer? 3D printer currently doesn't represent something that we offer as a saleable service from a manufacturing point of view. However, the thing never stops. The amount of stuff we print internally that's been, you know, if you had to go and buy it off the shelf, would have cost us at least 10 times more and probably not been bespoke and fit for purpose. No, it's been a great living investment.
Well, I was going to say the adaptive, you know, and we see a lot of, you know, the metal matrix, you know, for rapid prototyping. And again, that helps because it's reduction of you know, how long it would have done to create a prototype in, you know, 10, 20 years ago. Now you can do it with, you know, obviously a lot quicker. But
and a fraction of the cost.
And the cost, exactly. So
there's no doubt in my mind that whilst it is not a saleable process for us and not something we consider part of our manufacturing capability that we offer to our customers, I'd be surprised if that doesn't change in the next 10 years.
Absolutely.
The technology in that sector is coming on.
Yeah, I think
lightning.
It's an exciting combination between all the different types of machining, you know, whether it's adaptive or full-on manufacturing machining. There's going to be a combination, I guess, bringing those forward with automation and more of that type.
And when you put all of those things together, looking at it from the next generation's point of view, you know, when you talk robotics, automation, 3D printing, CAD CAM, you know, AR, augmented reality, using that as a design function where you know, you're not just manipulating it on the screen in front of you, you're manipulating it genuinely in 3D space in front of you. You know, you start adding all of those things together and all of a sudden we are a sector that, wow, there's some really interesting stuff going on there. You know, maybe I want to go and study AI, maybe I want to go and work for an investment bank. But you know what? Actually, some of the stuff that's going on in engineering is genuinely interesting, headline grabbing, world changing technology.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, something we really have got to get shouting about more of. You know, I know it's tough for us small, you know, the small businesses, but we got some, you know, the medium, large businesses in this country, but there's not a lot of shouting about it from, you know, from the, I guess, like, you know, the government and stuff like that. When you hear them sometimes the word manufacturing, you think, oh, come on, have a look.
We're the poor relation.
Yeah, I know.
We have been for 30 years.
Yeah, and that's where I think we could do with a bit of a jolt, and I'm sure it will happen. And I'm sure areas we're seeing with the some of the research centres in the country and the catapults, a lot of folks that side. So hopefully that we'll see more improvements on that side and more reshoring and bringing more manufacturing back in. So, well, Giles, that's I think that's great. I think we're coming towards the end now. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that. And I really was going to just sort of conclude by thanking you very much for being part of the podcast today.
My pleasure.
And, you know, it's sort of a conclusion or summing up, what does sustainability mean to Coker Engineering?
Anybody that wants to try and argue today, in the face of all the evidence that's stacked against us, that we can afford to stick our head in the sand any longer and pretend sustainability is not one of the most important pillars of the future of humanity, if not the single most important pillar in the future of humanity, must be living under a rock. You know, it factors into every single aspect of my decision-making and the company's decision-making process. In terms of my personal life, the car I choose to drive, where I choose to go on holiday, to which cutting tool we might use and whereabouts in the world that might have come from and what their supply chain looks like. It is absolutely interwoven in every single part of our decision-making process. And that's something that we needed to do for commercial benefits, but also something that we take pride in doing because it's us trying our best to step up and be a leader, you know, and hopefully if a few others grab that mantle, maybe we can actually turn this around and prevent the destiny that seems to be looming in front of us at the moment.
And I think with the attitudes that you have, you know, and going forward, and I think, you know, we're built up with companies like yours in manufacturing in the country, it's got to be the way forward. And so thank you very much, Josh. That's great.
Thank you. Pleasure.